Oh,
Ladies and gentlemen, before we talk about the only thing that people are here for, uh, shit, I forgot that we're live. We're live. There's no do-overs. Like when you're just recording a video, it's pretty easy to kind of do a few do-overs and you can do whatever. But Justin, what I was really curious on, because we've actually been in quite a few states within the past few months, and I was wondering what your thoughts and just from boots on the ground. I'd love to hear people in the comment section as well. What are you guys seeing the psychological shift between how people are spending money with kind of the new regime that we're in? Because I'm sure, Justin, there's some weird ass noise in the background.
yes. You forgot to turn on the music. You can't have a comfy stream without the music. Sorry, Josh. Okay, so you're asking the psychological shift. Yeah.
Yeah. Before you go into that, I'll kind of share some thoughts that I had today. Well, I'm sure a few months ago, everybody would see that all restaurants were packed. You'd see new Lamborghinis driving on the road pretty much every single day. It seemed like everybody had more money. I still see similar things like that today, but the tides are shifting, and it seems like people are they're definitely struggling a lot more, or there's a greater divide between people struggling and the ultra rich. For example, I was at my local gym today, Lifetime, which I mean it's a moderately expensive gym, and I heard some guy on the phone while in the lounge area while I was just doing some work. He was talking on the phone saying, "Well, the Fed." He was talking about the Fed raising rates, and he didn't really know what he was talking about, but he was definitely a real estate guy, and he basically said once the Fed raises his rates, he was talking to some broker. He was like, "I'll take all the inventory that you have for whatever cost possible," and I was just kind of giggling to myself thinking, well, like why is he going to do that? His assumption was that prices were going to come down because the Fed was raising rates. Therefore, he could get a better discount. I presume. I don't really know where he was going with it, but I mean, he was talking some really big numbers. Then me and Justin were just in New Orleans, and when you go to these more expensive restaurants, those expensive restaurants are still full. And in the French Quarter, kind of like the main area, that was still packed. There were still a ton of people there at all the bars and kind of the fancy places. But if you just drive a few blocks over, there seems to be just homeless people. They're like the divide between the ultra rich, or at least people who are spending more money than they have, and people who have no money seems to be getting larger and larger. Justin, what are you seeing? Because you've been traveling from state to state for a while now.
Yeah, so my experience has been so obviously I live in Houston. I've been to California, I've been through Seattle, as well as I just got back from New York the other day, or Long Island earlier today. In the financial coastal centers, so that would be like San Francisco and New York, you definitely seen, I would say the mood seems less exuberant from what I've seen. I am pleased to see that fewer and fewer people seem to be wearing masks, although there are still those who do wear a mask out there. For real estate, you mentioned that's interesting. I definitely think that the consensus I've seen on my side of the fence for real estate here in the Gulf Coast has been that if the Fed continues to raise rates, you will see the ability to get financing to support very large multiples dry up. Just a very fancy way of saying you can't borrow as much to buy a property. If you can't borrow as much, you can't offer as much. And so right now there's kind of a standoff, I think, between sellers and buyers. I don't know who'll be the first one to capitulate, but that's kind of, the vibe that I get right now. I have seen a lot more offers for solicitations, or that is to say, I have seen more offers saying, "Hey, listen, we have a multifamily asset we're looking to sell," versus, "Hey, listen, you have a multifamily asset. Will you consider selling it?" So so the kind of the vibe that I get is, it's, at least in real estate multifamily, is that it's turning from more of a seller's market to a buyer's market. I think really the bigger question, Josh, too, and that's what I was trying to look on my screen over here. There's no way that I can easily share this, but I wanted to talk also, sooner or later about the yen, of where it's currently at, as also about where U.S. Treasuries are at as well. So those are, I think, two other things.
Yeah. I have not done any research on this per se, but I was listening to the Market Huddle earlier today, and the guest they had on was saying that this is the worst drop in the U.S. Treasury market. And he was talking about volatility, and he was saying the volatility in the bond market has been for the past few months as if the VIX was at 60. Imagine that for a second, Justin.
Yeah.
What would the stock market look like if the VIX was at 60 for the past few months? Apparently, that's what the bond market has been like. And everybody's still talking about stock, but the bond market has been making drastic moves, and we can see this. It doesn't seem like a lot because we're still at such a low multiple. But if you look at the grand scheme of things as percent terms, there has been some humongous moves over this past year.
Yeah, and like I mean, you think back to the currency market, particularly like the yen and others, but the yen doing or the yen moving the way it's moved. I think that here, so like when it comes to the market mechanics and the ins and the outs of trading, that is really not my specialty. But I will note this when I look at a system, which I do know a little bit about, kind of trying to ascertain and figure out what's going on. If you have a system that's set in place to minimize volatility in the market, and that's what I suspect is where a lot of these things have been introduced. These systems that have been introduced rely on confidence in others. In other words, as great as these systems are at smoothing out and prevent, it's like a big shock absorber, for keeping things under control. Once these things get blown up, or there's some crisis of confidence, or there's some contagion where people don't trust one another, my suspicion is that not only will things revert to the norm, to what it should be, as you say, Josh, it should be VIX around 60, but it'll probably overshoot it. And in the process of this happening, you also wonder what else is going to get broken in the process of that. I mean, they obviously tied. You can think back to the meme stocks or the meme basket running. If the traditional modus operandi that the big guys use to manage positions are no longer effective, or at least are compromised. But that's kind of the
Yeah, if I can intervene there for a second. I've been spending a lot of time thinking much more of Main Street instead of the financial world recently, because that's what really matters at the end of the day. So you're kind of talking about things reverting to the mean. And what we were just talking about, where all these expensive bars and restaurants and clubs are always packed, that is going to have to revert to the mean. People should not have enough money to go out every single night and spend money on an expensive dinner. That really never happened before. And I'm not. Justin's kind of laughing because this is what we do whenever we kind of get.
No, I was actually laughing at this comment right here. So sorry.
Comments up right now, so I can't. So, but what I think, and this is just kind of a theory I thought up on my way home from the gym today, is I think there's a lot of people out there who, during kind of the stimulus check era, all the stocks, all asset prices skyrocketing, people were getting bonuses and big commissions or PPP loans. When all the new money was kind of getting into the system, a lot of people had the luxury of going out to all these fancy places, and especially it almost became their new normal. And let's say your ground level is you go out 3 times a week to a mid-range restaurant, but after kind of all this happened, your asset prices go through the moon and you get a big raise or whatever. Now you're going out 4 times a week at a very expensive restaurant. Maybe you buy a new car and maybe you upgrade your house. So now your standard of living have increased, but you were not producing anything extra. And now that we're almost reverting to the mean where there's less money in the system and you no longer have the affordability to do that, you still want to maintain that same standard of living. And I think a lot of people today are trying to live that same standard of living that they were living a year ago when they simply do not have the money to do it. And maybe we can see that in credit card debt blowing up or a lot of other things. Justin, what are your thoughts on that? Because I mean,
well, Josh, my thoughts on credit card debt, but let's not go there. What I would say is, here's what I have noted. Planes have been full and people have been buying or there seems to be people have been splurging on buying the front cabin. In other words, they're buying first or business. And so I don't know. I don't know. I strongly suspect that's a lagging indicator, not a leading indicator. But here's the thing. Like, I think it gets back to this core concept of, if people are not confident, they're not going to be spending. Even someone who is, let's say, of humble means, but is confident that their station in life will rise, will probably go out and splurge more than he or she would otherwise not have. Just like, the billionaire, even though they might be a billionaire, if they're concerned about their prospects, they might throttle back. Granted, if I was a billionaire, throttling back is probably a little different than, a humble person revving up, but still, the point remains the same. So I would trace it back to confidence and saying that as long as confidence, if people are bullish on confidence or people are long confidence, they're going to be long spending. If they're short confidence, then that's going to change. And this gets back into, I think, what other people have talked about, with the way the powers that be manage things, where it's much more psychological than it is empirical with the real world. Sorry, I'm just reading some of the comments here.
What are
I
you
kind
doing?
of,
I am OPEX is next week, and I can't,
yeah,
yeah. This is my my idol, Jeff Snyder. It's kind of an inside joke because now I do a lot of videos with George Gaiman on the Robo Capitalist channel, so I kind of just threw that up there. Well, actually, I forced my slave mother to Staples and had her print this out while I was sitting on my computer at home typing digits into the screen, producing goods and services, which
yeah. I need to track down that meme of the Doge boink, the hard times, the weak man hard times.
I'll put that one on the other side of the wall. It's
Yeah,
basically probably the best meme I've ever seen. It's the kind of the like the Doge Boink guy saying, "Mom, come pick me up. The weak men are creating hard times," or something like that.
yeah, and he's talking like a candy like cell phone. Like it's really really well done. But anyways, okay, let's see. Oneida Hider. Yeah, Justin, do you see creative finance winning in the real estate space since affordability and lending is so low? Yes, creative financing I think will always have a place, but the catch is that even creative financing has to give way to like the economic reality of the situation. And so like generally creative financing from what I've seen it's used to get you over the finish line. Like if you have a deal that you're trying to track or close on and you need bridge financing or you can't acquire, Freddie or Fannie paper on it because it's too beat up. There's too much deferred maintenance. That's where creative financing comes in, but generally creative finance is expensive. And the catch right now is that you would go into creative financing, at least from the way I've seen it in the past, where you could you wouldn't want to stay in creative financing. That would get you into the deal. You get the deal stabilized, and you get out of the creative financing into more long-term stable debt, which is cheaper debt. And so you've got it's the property cash flows. That would be my concern on that front. Is that at the end of the day, you have to have creative financing is like a catalyst, but it's not necessarily like an ongoing thing, as I understand it. And if it turns out that Freddie and Fannie are no longer running at a rate where properties can cash flow where they need to cash flow, then no amount of creative financing is going to, or creative financing will not be able to beat Freddie or Fannie, I would assume, in terms of what the interest rate component of the payment is going to be. And so that's.
And what is creative financing?
So creative finance would be like we had this in one of our first deals where we were under contract and our first lender, may they rot in hell and burn forever, I will never forgive them, walked away after the earnest money went hard. And the loan broker we were working with, he did a hustle and he got us a bridge loan. So basically it's like a loan shark. And so we were paying, I think it was 1% a month. So it was 12%, a year, complete full recourse on the note, which is a really bad note, or a really bad situation to be in. But the point is that we were able to raise the money, we were able to close the deal, and that was that. And that being said, too, I'm glad that the bridge lender, the creative financer, was there. But I was even more glad when I was able to get him out of my hair by cashing him out with a Freddie Mac product. There's the Freddie Mac small balance loan program is something we do a lot of business with, which has been really good. Let's see. We've got another question.
What are you doing for OPEX next week, Justin? So the refresh thoughts on GME.
Yeah.
What do you kind of think is going to play out, and are you positioned for OPEX?
Yeah. So what I've been doing recently is, as someone noted, boyfriend PiFi. I've been copying, or not copying, but
Precious, what's PiFi doing? Because I have not seen a single thing of what PiFi has done in the past few weeks.
Oh, so what he's been doing is he's been doing straddles. He's been opening up a straddle relative right before close and then closing it out, I would assume, sometime during the following day. So I've been kind of doing the same thing. PiFi suspects that if you watched the stream earlier today, he's bullish upside for the market tomorrow, barring any horrible news or some sudden deterioration or whatever, or black swan event, etc. So the answer to the question for OPEX is I've got a straddle that I opened on Friday that I probably will close out, seeing where it goes. So on that front, but that's much more short term. For OPEX, I am looking to reposition my 237.50 calls. As opposed to you are too, Josh, and I know a few other people who are.
I've seen Justin's portfolio lately, and to call a reposition of those old 950s, that is a wild understatement. Justin has been deep underwater, strangling these options with as much might as he possibly can.
But they're not zero yet. And the thing is, like, it's I was actually down much earlier in the year, and it was the March run that saved me. Josh, I sent you the
Oh my
screenshots of that,
god,
didn't
yeah,
I?
I was actually more scared for Justin than the feeble loss that I was going to take, just because like those big numbers, they're kind of scary when you see the when you see the losses. It's all fun and games until you're like, holy shit, like I do not want my friend to take that fat of an L. Even his ass would be sore after something like that.
Thank you, Josh. That not an appropriate financial analogy right
But
there.
okay, I really did not want to tell Justin this because the worst thing I could do is tell Justin that I am slightly bullish on GME because then he'll take me underwater and strangle me to death.
Yeah.
But I have positioned, and it is not a small position. It's actually quite large for myself. I mean, probably 6-7%, maybe even more than that percent of my portfolio in options. That's pretty hefty for me. And the reason why is I had Nasdaq puts for a long time. I've closed those out just because they're up so much, and I think the risk to the market right now is actually to the upside. If you look at where people are positioned, the put to call ratio is way up. The leverage is down massively. So I don't see a ton of risk to the downside unless we see kind of a black swan type event. It doesn't even have to be black swan. There's so much jargon in the financial system right now. There's all the reason to be bearish, and I am bearish on everything that I see, but I don't think the collapse is going to be today. Therefore, I'm going to try and play a short-term move to the upside, and the way I'm doing that is through GME, because I think if the market goes up, GME is a leveraged way to play that. And with OPEX, I think there's a lot that could potentially allow a run. So that's kind of what I'm doing. I would love to reposition puts to the downside, but I'm not doing that right now. I just don't see an immediate catalyst as to why the market should go down more than expectations. If you talk to anybody, even at your local gym, or just, I mean, your dentist is probably bearish right now. I don't personally know a single person who is just saying, oh yeah, the stock market looks great, let's just go all in and buy. So that's kind of my very, very humble opinion, and it could switch up very quickly.
Yeah, and the other thing too is that if I'm just trying to pull up this tweet right here that looks kind of interesting. Let me see if I can get it up here. Is that if how determined is the Fed or the Treasury? Let's just see what the Fed. How determined are they to protect the market or to sink the market?
I think they'll take the market down because they want to reduce demand, but they don't want to take the credit market down. And it looks like we're seeing some bubblings of that, of some issues in the credit market, but not bad enough. I'm just betting that right now too many people are too bearish, and the risk. What would hurt more people is if we see an upside move than a downside move, just because of how many people are actually bearish.
Yeah, and the other thing I'll throw in there too is that what you also run into is you run into the politics of the situation too, with midterm elections right around the corner. In other words, if the Fed scene is crashing the market, a week or two before midterms here in the States, it's there are dimensions that go beyond macro for these things. So I just came across this thing, and let me see if I can make this bigger, kind of sorta. Josh, can you read this? It's U.S. government bonds total return drawdown, and the point is that it looks like people are selling off bonds.
Well, I mean, that's 2020 to 1800s. I mean, you need to go back to that chart. I mean, that's not a short-term chart. That goes back to the 1800s. I'm going to have to look that up and do some more research on that. I mean, this is the worst drawdown that we've seen since the 1800s.
Actually, it's since the Revolutionary War.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sorry, just a quick shout out to this comes from AB Campbell on Twitter. So I mean, I just caught this, and so I mean, I'm just looking at this real time right now on this front. But again, this gets back into this thing where I would say that. So going back to the GME angle here, on Going back, sorry, just comments, not comments. Going back to the GME angle here, I guess the meme stock basket. I think a lot of the ways that the guys who are short volatility or want to go long volatility, I think the ways that they control their positions is they have to have what I call like these exotic financing transactions. And the more exotic or the more complex the transaction, the more you rely on your various counterparties. And if something were to happen to impair the belief or the confidence of the counterparties, it's going to get messy pretty damn quickly. So, anyways.
Justin, what's the story with Ichun? Did he buy
Icon?
Icon?
No, like Joshua, like I wish I'd give you more insight. Like I am really not an equities guy. Like I keep saying that. I mean, my bag really is real estate. I think there's obviously something in GME, but kind of the way I personally play it for myself is I've got my shares, I've got my options. If we have a run, in this particular case, I want to revisit because I want January 2024 options, but basically just kind of, be prepared, sit back, and wait patiently. That's all that I can really do on that front.
What do you see with people? I mean, we're just going everywhere with this live stream. What do you see with people kind of locally? What's the kind of psychological makeup? I know that you've been hanging around quite a lot of people in your hometown.
Yeah. So what you're seeing is that I get the vibe that people there's like this boomerang effect, at least what I've seen in my very narrow circle, that people who were really who took the pandemic very seriously, and shut down everything. I see them wanting to venture out more and more and more. And they've saved up a lot of money and they're going out back into, essentially back into life. But I also see, to the thing you said earlier too, Josh, where you are seeing some caution and some, temperance on that. Definitely real estate slowing down. I'm seeing, as I said before, like more deals being marketed versus, people soliciting for deals, which is interesting. Anyways, hold on a sec. What's life from I say? People don't understand that if shorts covered all their shares and GME went parabolic, it would just get shorted down again like it did in January. When shorts are covered, new shorts will come in.
That's a dangerous game. That's a very, very dangerous game.
So here's the question for that, light for my life. I think that's a valid point. I would be very curious to see what happened in a situation where the various and it's not crime or anything like that, but the various mechanisms that allow this freeze up and spasm. Consider what happened. I think it was either February or April. I can't remember when, but Fedwire went down in 2021. And I think it was February. And within about an hour or so of Fedwire going down during the middle of the day, you started to see a run up on GME in that situation. I'm not trying to imply that the Fed is doing any hanky-panky here, just to be clear, but rather if Fedwire is if Fedwire is a material way that banks communicate with other banks, and suddenly if this channel goes down, then it would seem that the bank's abilities to coordinate or to manage and balance the risk, whatever, would also be impaired. So to answer your question, I think you've got a very valid point there, but I'd also be very curious to see what happened in an environment where the traditional or where the financial engineering products that have been developed are not able to be used due to black swans, macro issues, technical difficulties, Russians, I shouldn't say that. Some attack from a state actor on the financial, infrastructure where things weren't able to settle and therefore things just got out of whack.
You said you wanted to talk about the yen?
Oh yeah, so let me pull up this thing right here. Just a second. I apologize not being prepared. I just showed up. I thought we were going to do a video or a recorded video, and Josh's like, "Oh, we've got a live stream." I'm like, "Oh well, so be it."
Yeah, and not only did I tell him, I said we're doing it in 45 seconds.
Yeah, dear Josh, give me a second. Do some word for dangling while I get this thing pulled up here.
I did not plan on doing any word for dangling while I was here.
Well, what have you seen in Boston or from your?
I see a lot of nice cars, and I see all the restaurants that are much more upper class still packed. And I mean, sometimes and the hotels are extremely expensive, but I also see kind of the middle class to like the regular middle class restaurants. Those ones are kind of ghost towns. But I don't really know what to make of that. Well, I mean, my gut feeling is that just the divide between the rich and poor keeps on increasing. I do think the Bank of Japan and the Bank of England are probably the most interesting thing going on in macro right now. It's everything outside the U.S. is almost just collapsing in front of us.
Yes, I don't know if you can see this or not. Is this clear, Josh? I need to make this bigger or smaller.
No, it's all good. But
Well,
you need to go on a longer time for us. Go like 6 months or something like that.
okay. Let's
There.
see.
Go down to the bottom where it says, oh, there you go. Oh, geez.
Yeah.
This looks ugly.
And the thing is that I mean, I wish my trading view things. I wish I could see this in a percentage drop. But like, if you go back to, let me zoom out just a little bit more. How far back can I go?
Well, you can go to all down at the bottom. Oh.
Yeah.
Is this the lowest that we've seen in the recent time? Wow. I do know some people in Japan right now, and they're saying it sucks.
Yeah. So I guess this is one of those things where like I'm just very curious to see where this is where this is going to go. But this is one of those things where things can break quickly and unexpectedly.
That's damn right, all nighter. Josh doing to Justin what George does to Josh live stream.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway,
Credit Suisse and Deutsche Bank to 2008 2.0. Everyone is trying to fight the last war, and the last war was a banking crisis. I don't know if that's what it's going to be this time, but there's a lot of issues in the banking system right now, mainly offshore, though. The onshore banks, they have a ton of regulations, and their balance sheets, from what I can see, on balance, not off balance, doesn't seem too bad. But if the contagion spreads because a Credit Suisse type market does blow up, then that's going to cause the contagion that would be needed across the rest of the world.
yeah, and like what I would suspect is that you have the usual problem children that come up. Credit Suisse being one. Deutsche has been in the news on and off for the past maybe 2.5 years or so, is what I recall. And here's the interesting thing too, right? This gets back into the perversity of the confidence problem. Is that even if, let's say, the banks are perfectly fine, there's objectively fundamentally nothing wrong with Credit Suisse or Deutsche. If the market perceives there as being something wrong, you can create it's like being spooked by your own shadow, and a problem is created out of nothing, even though there wasn't a problem there to begin with. So I don't quite know what's going to happen on that front. But I will say this. I mean, I always go back to, I love bringing it up, LTCM from 98 when Russia defaulted on their bonds. And my suspicion is that if you see, I think part of the issue, and this is taking from Manarino and Rickards right here, but if you see something happen where government issued bonds, particularly U.S. Treasuries, are somehow impaired or somehow, people view these as being the pristine gold standard of collateral. If that ever were to change for whatever odd reason, or at least if the perception or the confidence has ever changed on that front, you would see problems in that regard, because then all of a sudden people say, well, wait a minute, we had all this collateral and we were banking on the financial integrity of our counterparties because they had all this collateral, and now nobody knows what anybody has. And then it also becomes into the question of, well, what is collateral in this regard? Just a side note, Josh and I did a live stream a few days, or like earlier this week, last week, where I started floating the idea that when banks issue broad money suppliers to like M2, it's actually not issuing an asset, it's actually issuing a contra liability. But I'm still working on developing that. But I think that's a very interesting way of viewing where we're at right now. And when it gets back to the quote by Morgan, Josh, if you recall him saying, money, or what is it? Gold is money and everything else is credit. In other words, that gold and silver are a commodity. Let's just stick with gold. It's the only thing that can go on the left-hand side of the balance sheet for assets. Everything else is a liability, which means you cannot put it on the asset side. And in order to balance the transaction, it would have to be something else. So there's something else being a contra liability when a bank makes a loan instead of an asset.
This is a great point, Justin. Adam Taggart has talked quite a bit about this. You can buy I bonds offering 9.2% until the end of October, that's coming up.
Adam, actually, I was another buddy who brought it up.
There's quite a few contingencies there. Like you're forced to hold that for over a year to get that 9.2%. And you like they're pretty illiquid, so there's really no option to sell them. But 9.2% is damn good in this market. I would suspect in a year inflation's going to be significantly lower than 9.2%. Or I'm not going to say that, but over the next few months, I suspect inflation will be significantly lower than 9.2%. If there is a financial crash, then that could bring maybe a 2% deflation for a few months. But then the government's response to that could kick us up to extreme inflation. That's kind of, but who knows if that's before or over a year. Yeah, you can invest 10K, but you can also gift it to people. So I think you can get a max, depending on how many family members you are, you could get maybe $50,000 to $100,000.
Yeah, exactly. And if you want to get cute with LLCs or whatever, right? Yeah, exactly right. On that.
Jeff, I have a tax question for you, because right now my business is not set up in an LLC. Is that gonna fuck my taxes?
Not necessarily,
Like,
but
so let's say every dollar I get, I just spend it on employees. I have yet to talk to any tax persons this year. I need to get on top of that, because I was talking to someone and they were saying I should probably set up some sort of corporation where I can put this all in, therefore it's tax deductible.
Yeah. So generally, I mean, you can just record your expenses. I think operate as a sole proprietor, but the reason you want to set up a corporation is for the liability shield. And like generally, if you're a single, I believe this is the way it works. If you're a single entity or single member LLC, it's actually a disregarded structure for tax purposes. So everything just flows back onto your was it 1040? So
I should be fine.
Yeah,
even if I'm not getting even if I'm not giving any of my clients any sort of tax information. They're just kind of sending me money, and then I'm just kind of paying people.
Well, so they should be demanding from ideally they should be demanding. Was it your W-9, which would be your social, is what you'd be using?
Some people are, some people aren't. Some people are like, let me pay you in Bitcoin, and then that gets kind of opaque. But that's like we've gone everywhere. We've gone Main Street. We've gone tax advice from Justin. If I get fucked on my taxes, not only are we never going to do a video again, I'm probably going to hang myself, because the government can go suck one. Or I'll just remove my U.S. citizenship and I'll go live in the middle of Colombia and just live a Pocahontas kind of life.
I think the charm of South America would wear off quicker than you think. Let's see. Yeah.
Are optional.
Yeah, you need a liability shield.
But fuck. Yeah, taxes are not my strong suit. I kind of get the idea of them, and tax write-offs. Like I know it can be justified as a tax write-off, and it's pretty much every single thing that I do is a tax write-off. But my strong suit is not getting on top of it and finding a good tax person, and that's probably the hard part. Wow. You're actually
me too.
All right.
So, okay.
Have you seen any good shows or movies recently, Justin?
No, I mean, like it's all been garbage recently. I used to watch all my movies on planes, and I mean, I haven't been overseas in a long time. Or for
But you mean the large seas where the flights are like 10 hours?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think my next international trip is I've got one going over to Singapore and to LA, but that's the only one on the books right now.
What, I thought that you had some mileage flights going to.
Oh, yeah, but that's just domestic. That's just goofing around and going domestic, like Houston, Seattle, San Fran.
No joke, all-nighter. That's really cool. He's actually related to Pocahontas.
Oh, really?
I thought that was a fucking a Disney movie.
Yeah, it is a Disney movie, but it's a Disney movie based off like a person.
So, oh, really?
Yeah.
That chick. Nice one, all-nighter. Nice one. All right. Should we just end it here and take the L for all of our viewers that are probably. Leave the hate mail to Justin. We'll see you guys in the next one.
Take care, guys.
Wait, before you go, shameless plug to our premium membership. Thank you to our premium subscribers. It only costs you about $20,000 a month, and all the profits go to the greedy Justin J Corp.
Yeah, negative. Take care, guys.